Now, one note in Casey's report that I found very interesting was the paragraph about a significant proportion of these cases of grooming gangs and child sexual exploitation appear to involve suspects who are non-UK nationals and or who are claiming asylum in the UK. So Louise Casey has confirmed, as many of us reasonably suspected, that illegal immigrants crossing the English Channel were participating in the grooming gangs. Bear in mind, in the last week alone, 1,500 illegal immigrants were recorded crossing the Channel in small boats. Now, the government are promising, as the Casey National Audit has been published, to legislate to prevent immigrants, asylum seekers who commit sex offences from ever being granted asylum in the country. Now, this wouldn't be a problem in the first place if Keir Starmer hadn't written the textbook for lawyers on how to apply the 1998 Human Rights Act, which codified the European Convention on Human Rights into British law, through which, via Article 2 and Article 8, lots of foreign sex offenders appeal to have their Home Office deportation orders under the 2007 Immigration Act quashed. And these include sex offenders who have said, it would be detrimental to my children if I were deported, because I wouldn't be able to see them. The last person we would want is a paedophile to be able to see his own children. So the government are now having to sort of clean up this mess that they themselves have made. One high-profile example being Abdul Azadi, the Clapham chemical attacker from Afghanistan, who lots of people remember there was a nationwide manhunt for him after he splashed a bit of acid on his face and sort of burnt his eye off. He threw himself in the Thames, drowned himself, had an Islamic funeral. Turns out that he had been ordered for deportation twice after breaking into the country in 2016 because his asylum claims had failed, and he had committed a sex offence of sexual assault and indecent exposure, and then he had a false conversion to Christianity, and so a judge quashed his deportation order on the ground that he might feasibly be persecuted for his sudden coming to Jesus moment if he were to go back to Afghanistan. Again, devout Muslim, given a Muslim funeral. So this is another avenue for exploitation that the government doesn't seem to be legislating against. Now, it shouldn't shock us that foreign rapists are exploiting Britain's permissive asylum system, right? We know that Afghanis and Eritreans, who have made up the majority of small boat crossings this year, are 20 times more likely than British nationals to commit sex offences. We know this. We do not put them on an immigration red list, which should absolutely be in place. We know that the people smuggling gangs have targeted North African men with videos of girls drunk and dressed immodestly by Islamic standards, filmed without the consent on nights out in places like Manchester, and sold our women as the spoils of adventure and conquest to prospective illegal immigrant customers. And we know this because I helped break the story in August 2023, and then as of the 1st of April 2025, social media companies met at an illegal migration summit in London with the government and have agreed to ban these adverts on platforms like Instagram and TikTok. So we shouldn't be surprised that per Islamic theology, per the view that a centimetre of flesh on display by a woman gives the most predatory and violent men license to gratify their impulses and urges via sexual assault. We shouldn't be shocked that they treat our women this way when they come over here. We should, however, be appalled that as a matter of subsequent government policy, we are taxed to house, battery farm, these foreign predators at our expense. And a contractor, Serco, is now offering private landlords 5-year guarantee contracts, subsidising all of their rent, their utility bills and their council tax, to house these illegal migrants and asylum seekers in dispersed accommodation, because hotels are costing, I think, £145 a night, and dispersed accommodation costs taxpayers £45 a night. Now, I'd rather not be in the situation where I'm debating how much I'm going to spend on housing a sex offender. I would rather they were all deported immediately. Instead, National Audit Office is now estimating the cost of this, and they've said that the asylum costs will be triple that which was projected by the previous Conservative government when they started housing them in hotels after 2018, all the small boats started coming across. It's now going to be £15.3 billion and rising. And it'll be even more, as Nick Timothy has pointed out, when the government goes ahead with plans to give asylum seekers, illegal migrants claiming asylum, right to access welfare and benefits while they're in the country making their claim, even if that claim is refused. Now, of course, the grooming gangs, we all knew that this was caused by immigration. Maggie Oliver herself has come out on the Daily Tea podcast and said that increased levels of illegal immigration and young men with different value systems who are coming to the country are going to make this problem worse. Anyone with eyes could see that, but of course, it's always useful to have people that are experts in the field on this particular problem, like Louise Casey, like Maggie Oliver, saying, no, there's a direct causal relationship here between allowing violent, fighting-age males to break into the country who disproportionately commit sex offences, and them going on to be part of these organised trafficking networks, the grooming gangs that have blighted towns like Rotherham, Rochdale and Telford for decades now. So it's especially insulting when Labour Minister, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, goes on Question Time, decides to gaslight the entire British public by insisting, quote, the majority of people in these boats are children, babies, and booed him. He decided to double down and deflect to this anecdote where one time standing on Dover Beach, presumably with a bastion of British values that is Mike Tapp, he spotted one dinghy with a few women and children in it. Bear in mind, since 2018, when over 160-odd thousand of these people have been recorded crossing the channel, 73% of them are adult males. And you can add an extra how many percentage being adult males that tell Border Force that they are children. Because again, we go off their word and we don't apply age verification checks to these people. So we just got to take their word for people, willing to break the law and ditch all their documents to get into the country. At this point, there's probably a whole coral reef of discarded passports and phones at the bottom of the English Channel, right? You can add a massive percentage of men that are just lying about being children on top of that 73%. So let's say upwards of 85% are grown men. And we know they're not fleeing war, because who fights in a war? The men. So either this is the largest collection of cowards ever on the face of the earth, or this is a fighting force, a standing army, who are committing sex offences against our women and girls, and who have left their wives, sisters, mothers, and children behind. Why? Well, we know from the adverts that they see our women as property and plunder and the rewards for their adventure. So, yeah, they're not vulnerable, they're not fleeing conflict, they're coming here to cause it. And we know that lots of them are lying about their age. The perfect example of this is Lawangin Abdul Azadi, who stabbed to death aspiring Marine Thomas Roberts. He told Border Force he was 14 when he was actually 19. He then got placed in a school in Bournemouth and into foster care, got kicked out of the school because he was truant and then chased children around with a knife, and then he went and stabbed an aspiring Marine to death. Now, this was after he'd already shot 2 other Afghan asylum seekers to death with a Kalashnikov in Serbia. And because there was no age verification check, we couldn't ID him, even though he was wanted, I think, by Interpol from multiple police forces because he'd moved through countries after committing the murder in Serbia. So then Jones decided to go on X and gaslight the entire British public by saying, I was referring to this one example, and he went on Camilla Tominey's show and was very evasive and refused to apologise for lying. But everyone knows that these are foreign criminals who are coming to live off Britain's dwindling largesse and commit sex offences against our women and girls. And now new research that just so happens to have come in on the same day as the Casey report from the Centre for Migration Control shows the impact of immigration on sex offences from 2024. So this found that foreign nationals committed up to a third of all sexual assaults in 2024. Of the 1,453 sexual assault convictions, 380 were foreign nationals and 118 were unknown. So that's 34.27%. That's despite foreign nationals making up a reported 10.9% of the population per the 2021 census. And this is why we need an emergency census, because we don't know how many people from what country, legally or illegally, are in this country, because the 2021 census was recorded and then published before the Boris wave, before the world historical levels of third world migration that were not wanted by the British public but inflicted onto us anyway came into our country. Now, the conviction rate for foreign nationals is 5.75 per 100,000 of the population versus 1.77 per 100,000 for the British population. So foreign nationals are convicted of sexual assault against women at a rate 2.24 times that of the British population. So we are basically, knowingly, importing, through legal and illegal means, foreign sex offenders, and we know they're going to be more likely to be sex offenders, and yet our government is doing it to us anyway. They could just stop it, but because of a dogmatic obsession with the blank slate, a belief in the ineluctable power of British values and human rights to reform even the most ardent jihadian or predator to become as law-abiding, peaceful and productive as you and me, because of this, they will refuse to stop importing sex offenders. It is infuriating. The data says 27.3% of rape convictions last year were of migrants, the main offenders being India, Romania, Poland, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sudan, Bangladesh, Iraq, Iran, Lithuania, and Nigeria. We could just stop immigration from those countries. Pretty much all of those countries, Poland accepted, are net tax detriments. Look at the data from Denmark, look at the data from the Netherlands, look at the data from the OBR, which says that by the age of life expectancy, 81, low-wage migrants, that's 95% of all visas that come in every year, net tax dependers, cost the taxpayer between age 25 and age 81, £465,000. And that's if they don't come when they're children, for the extra fees paid on their healthcare and schooling, and that's if they're not born here as second-generation migrants, which we know from data from the Netherlands, they repeat the same criminal and economic patterns as their parents, which is why 33% of all Bangladeshi and all Pakistani adults have never worked a day in their lives. We do not need these people here. We do not need these people living off our taxes. We do not need these people committing sex offences against our women and girls because they see them as property. They do not see them as capable of equal moral dignity as men, which of course they are. That is how the English think. That is how we treat our women and girls here. We do not treat them as the rest of the world do. But if you import the rest of the world, you get how the rest of the world treats our women and girls. So stop it. Every single one of those sexual assaults is a life ruined. Every single one of those sexual assaults is a woman incapable of trusting the good men in her life, incapable of having a hug from her dad, or incapable of forming a relationship with her boyfriend, or incapable of having kids for as long as it takes therapy to assist her with her recovery if she ever recovers. None of those needed to happen. Yes, we have plenty of our own sex offenders. They should be in prison for far longer or return the death penalty, in my belief. That does not mean we need to import more. And that does mean that every single sexual offence committed by a foreign national is entirely preventable. And this is now in the Casey report. There is no excuse to have any of these men here. Don't just refuse their asylum applications. Don't just let them loiter about in the system. Don't just deport them. Stop them ever coming here in the first place.